Pete Wishart.
Very grateful to you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Basingstoke for securing this very important debate today, and her other parliamentary colleagues for contributing to what I thought has been an excellent debate, and I think has given us an opportunity to kick round some of the issues which go back now to almost 2 years, I think, since it was first arisen in the House of Commons. The major theme of this seems to be there seems to be a slowness or a paucity about executing some of the conclusions and recommendations of the report by Dame Laura Cox Report. I would take great exception to that. It doesn't seem to be particularly unusual that the report was only produced in October. We had a debate in November where we accepted these conclusions. It's only June the next year. Now, I'm pretty used to the glacial pace that this House actually operates under and the speed that things get done. So I don't actually find all that unreasonable, the fact that we've waited some 7 or 8 months to get to the stage. And I want to go through the conclusions one by one about where we are in terms of making progress. Because as everybody says, there are only the 3 conclusions and recommendations that's made by Dame Laura, and one I think we've already all established has been dealt with, and that was to abandon the valuing others policy and the respect policy. Now that's gone. The second was, of course, that the independent complaints and grievance scheme should be amended to ensure that historical cases can be heard. And I think we've heard a few contributions, notably from the Right Honourable Gentleman who represents the Commission in this House, that there is progress being made in that. And I'll declare it my interest, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I am a member of the ICGS and I have been since its inception, and I've just recently been appointed, if that's the term, onto the House of Commons Commission, an august body that I look forward to serving on with other colleagues around the House. So I'll declare those interests just now. And as a member of the ICGS, we take things very seriously when we're presented with this. Now, this came back as a recommendation from the Cox Report, and it was really important that we looked at this, but looked at this very seriously and with full intent, which is what we've done. And I'm seeing the shadow leader of the House shaking their head with all that. We had a series of meetings just to see how we would respond to this. And we have said that we would move forward when it comes to this, and we've had the consultation, and we're trying to ensure that we do move forward, and that the recommendations accepted by the House on that specific point is progressed. And I know that there's a meeting of the House of Commons Commission, which will be my first, where this will be further debated and hopefully progress. So I don't see that big an issue with that, the Right Honourable Lady. And if I'm missing something, she's more than happy to intervene and tell me where there has been the drawbacks and where this is being lost somehow, because I just don't quite see this now. In terms of the third recommendation, which is that the process for determining complaints should be an independent process free from any involvement from members of Parliament. Again, I'm seeing progress with this. This was a complicated issue about how we historically dealt with things, and there had to be delicate negotiations with the Standards Committee about how this would be progressed. And I'm disappointed the fact that the Honourable Lady who chairs the Standards Committee isn't here, because I'm pretty certain she'd be able to reiterate this, that when we are making stuff like this, really important decisions about how we operate a scheme like this, it's important that we get this right. And I know that there is a real issue just about how this was done. There was issues to do with legality as well as other things that had to be considered. But I think we are making steady progress, and there is a view that independence will be created, and I don't think there's anything by anybody in this House who wants to try and deny that. And so I'm seeing progress on all of these things. It might not be fast enough for the Right Honourable Lady and other members of the House, but I'm making a tick through all of these recommendations, and I'm seeing a tick on the top one, and I would say 2/3 of a tick for the other ones. And so I really do understand that there is a real desire to get things going, but we're not doing all that bad.
The honourable gentleman be satisfied if employers in his constituency reacted so glacially slow, to use his term, to important recommendations about the safety of his constituents? Because I'm not sure he would be. And I also think he needs to reflect on whether those 3/4 ticks he's giving to those 2 elements actually make any difference to the staff in this place at all. It might make a difference to him and members of the Commission, but I think if you were to ask to staff, they wouldn't have noticed the blind bit of difference.
come on to that, because that's important, and I think it's a very important point from the Right Honourable Lady. But what's more important to me when it comes to these things is it's done right for the constituents I represent, for the staff that I employ in this House, for my obligations and responsibilities as a Member of Parliament in this House. It's important that we get this right, and that's why I think some of the conversations and negotiations that's been required has to be played out in order that we get there to the right solution. And I do believe we're getting there, and we owe it to this House to get to the right place. We owe it to them, because we have to make progress with this, and we have to deal with it. I remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, when this all started, there was this huge flurry of activity. Party leaders were getting together under the chair of the Prime Minister. There was an urgency about this. Something had to be done. The energy seems to have been sucked out of that initiative and that early energy, and I don't know why that's the case. I'm looking around, and the House is a bit busier now, but I was only able to count at its busiest 15 members of Parliament in here to discuss these really important issues. There was one point during the discussions and debate when we were down to 7 backbench colleagues listening to these important proceedings today. So I would make a suggestion, Madam Deputy Speaker, that somehow we're not getting this message out to other colleagues. And I'm grateful to everybody who's been here, and the contributions have been sincere and heartfelt. But I don't think we're getting an excitement across the House with these proposals. And we have to do more to ensure that Members of Parliament are engaged in this process, because it's about us. It's about our behaviour. It's about how we respond to the staff and to the Parliament community in this House. I'll give it to the Honourable Gentleman.
I thank him for giving way. Would he agree with me that perhaps one way of getting the attention of members would be to act on what I had suggested earlier, and in fact is the Alison Stanley recommendation, that all members of Parliament should be required to do the Valuing Others or Valuing Everyone programme? That would draw people's attention to it.
I'm going to go on to the Alison Stanley recommendation, because they're really important. I think the six-month review of the ICGS scheme was really, really important, and I think we're all grateful to the contribution and the stellar leadership offered by Alison Stanley in the 6-month review. And again, I'm seeing the Shadow Leader of the House shaking her head in agreement, because she demonstrated real leadership when it came to these issues, and she did that. But one of the main recommendations, and one of the things that we've changed in this scheme, and this is why these things are so important that we get right, one of the things that we've changed is that training will now be compulsory for all members of Parliament. In the early stages of the working report, it was suggested that it would be voluntary, and we tried to do as much as possible to encourage members to undertake training. Now it is a mandate, and I know the Right Honourable Gentleman was on the training yesterday, because he was on there with 2 of my staff that I brought all the way down from Perth to ensure that they would be amongst the first to be properly trained on this scheme. So, and I know from my staff's recollections of that event that the Right Honourable Member was a very assiduous and energetic collaborator in that exercise. So I congratulate him for... I unfortunately have not... I was supposed to be with the leader of the House and the shadow leader of the House to be the first to undertake the training, but I had responsibilities elsewhere. But I will, and I say this today, and I'll be held to account for this, I will be as the earliest opportunity to undergo training, and every member of this House should ensure that they do this, because it is important. We have 15,000 people who work on this estate. We have huge obligations and responsibilities to ensure that everybody who enters this estate, who works here, or who are visitors to the House, are treated with the respect and dignity that they have. It's the one thing I think that, regardless of everything else that happens in this place, that we could all agree on, and something I think we could all unite tonight on. There should be zero tolerance of any inappropriate behaviour by anybody who works on this estate, whether that's people who work for members of Parliament or in any capacity across this House. Now, I served on the ICGS, and I want to join the tributes to the Right Honourable Member for South Northamptonshire. I always find it curious when you've got South and North in the same constituency name, but I just think I just got it about right. Because the Right Honourable Member for South Northamptonshire was another example of real dedicated and inspired leadership for this report. And I think it was through her own determination and sheer damn willingness to get this through that she managed to ensure that we got to a stage where we are with that. And I think that if anything's going to be a legacy to the Right Honourable Lady will be the fact that we've been able to progress this and get to the stage where we are when it comes to the ICGS. But we have just had the 6 months review with Alison Stanley, and I've said already just how in high regard I held Alison in the work that she'd done, and I think all of us who are on ICGS are eternally grateful for all that. Now, there was important recommendations in that, and it was right that the ICGS was reviewed in 6 months, and there's another commitment, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you know, to have it reviewed again in 18 months. And I'll say again today, I'm quite happy to continue to serve on this, given my historic association with the work that's been done so far. So I look forward with serving in that committee and coming back in a year's time just to see where we are. But there were some things, and the most important one was the one mentioned by the Right Honourable Gentleman, which is that training will be mandatory. And then we had a look at some of the processes that have been set up, the independent helpline, for example. And I think there's a general conclusion that this is working satisfactorily. We've seen the numbers of people who have sought help and advice by the independent line, and the numbers are really encouraging, that so many people have now seen this as a feature that they could go to in order to secure the assistance that they feel they require. So we know that it is working. And all the way through the ICGS, we've looked at things to do with confidentiality, with involvement of members of Parliament, the so-called marking your own homework. And we've looked at things to do with ensuring that we do make progress in historic cases. We've had countless debates, even sometimes arguments about all of these features, but we got to a place where we are reasonably okay. Now, the historic cases one, I believe we are getting there. I think we're going in the right direction. I think we were probably shaken a little bit by legal advice that we got about how a new scheme would be applied to people who hadn't signed up to this. And I think we all questioned the quality of that legal advice and opinion. But it was something that, like initially we were prepared to accept, which said that it couldn't. Dame Laura Cox doesn't care less about that. And as a former High Court judge, she was probably right. There probably doesn't become any greater opinions when it comes to this thing. And so what she said there was she was have nothing to do with that, and that historic cases would have to be looked at. And that was a clear recommendation to the independent ICGS that we look at this and incorporate that, which I've said there is a real absolute commitment to do this. I won't go through the progress on the other issues that Dame Laura recommends, because, again, as I've said, I think we're getting there. I know it might not be to the speed and satisfaction of some people in this House, but I think we'll get there. And I believe within a short period, and I'll say short period, we will get to the point where we will have implemented all the recommendations that's been made by Dame Laura. There's one feature that I don't think we've made enough progress in, and it's something that I continually and repeatedly come back to, and that is the culture of this place and how this House operates, how it appears, how it feels, and what it says and expresses about dynamic power relationships and arrangements. I think we have to do more work in this. Banning alcohol in members' tea room and in the cafeteria. That was to be it. That was to be it. Absolutely and utterly ridiculous. One small bottle glassful of wine. That was attacking the culture in this place. Well, I'm sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's almost laughable that that was the only positive and concrete proposal that was implemented. It's just nonsense. So we have to look more at how this place is done, and we've got a blueprint for that, because I've got Sarah Child's Good Parliament Guide, which I thought, and if members haven't read this, please have a look at it, because it suggests a number of things that we could do, even down to how we light the place, how we arrange and put together meeting spaces, and how we do all these things. We have to. This place practically oozes patriarchy out of its statues, its paintings and walls. It's a place where new types of arrangements that we need to put in place to try and become the modern Parliament that we need to is almost impossible to design, because the way that we arrange this place, about the way this House is structured. I've suggested a number of proposals how we do it. The way we address each other in this place is ridiculous. I can't call these people by their first name. How many other places in the world can't you do that? I was born with a name, Maren. I'm quite happy for people to use it. I've got to wear a tie in this place, and I'd be dressed like this. You know, the Speaker of the House is actually responsible for dressing me, Madam Deputy. Just a minute. The last person that had responsibility for dressing me to go out was my mum. And yet we allow the Speaker to define a dress code for male members of Parliament. It's utterly ridiculous. I know the Right Honourable Gentleman said we've dispensed with the tie arrangements because he is an example of that. But how long did that take? You know, it's just absurd. So we've got all these weird things where gentlemen of this House are expected to dress in a particular way which serves no purpose whatsoever other than to try and suggest a sort of authority. Let's do away with these sort of things. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I thank him for giving way. He has just noticed that the tie example was perhaps not a very good one to go for. But can I encourage him, however, and his colleagues, who have been assiduous at pushing the idea that perhaps the new temporary chamber that is going to be established in Richmond House is used to test some of the things which I think he, and certainly I, would like to see in terms of different arrangements in this chamber.
Well, I'm grateful to Honourable, and the tie example was a bad one, even though it did take as long as I said, you know, and he's a proud exponent of the non-tie arrangements and decorum of this place, and it's something that I know that he expresses very proudly. But yes, I do support him, because I think that there is things that we could do. But if we're moving out of this place, why are we moving to a temporary place which just does exactly the same things and looks and feels and appears as the same place? Why not try and do something different? And I know that the Right Honourable Gentleman has been paying attention to my very clear and detailed agenda to replace the current Speaker in this chair, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I know that the proposals that I put forward in that would suggest things like electronic voting. You know, let's try and bring this place into the 21st. And as he says, from a sedentary position, they relate to the Cox recommendations. So can we please do more to look at how we do our business in this House, how this place feels, how it looks to people who come into this House? For goodness sake, we've still got a place down that corridor called the Lords. Like the forelock tugging, the cap doffing goes on, and there are still people called Lords and Ladies. What does that say to people from across the country who come to this place, that somehow these are betters, these are people who are titled and they run the country?
The Honourable Gentleman alluded to earlier in his remarks that he's a member of the House of Commons Commission, and I think it will be noticeable to people who are listening to this debate today that the two individuals who are members of the Commission are far more positive about the progress that's been made on Cox than the rest of us. Could perhaps the Honourable Gentleman remind me and other members who put him in his position on the House of Commons Commission? It would be helpful for the House to be aware of that.
You see, that's a very, very good point, and I will answer it fully and comprehensively. And I don't know who it was that said about election to the House of Commons Commission. Of course it should be elected, and that's what we should be doing for everybody who's in the management of this House. But I would go further than that, because one of the key features about the ICGS was the fact with staff members involved in that, trade union representatives in the general staff across this House. Now, they did two very important things. One, they gave a voice to the members of staff who work across this House, and they made contributions which I felt were probably about the most useful and positive throughout that whole experience. Secondly, what they had was a restraining facility on members of Parliament that were on the group, and somehow we were better behaved because there was members of staff within that group, and it didn't actually feel like a bunch of MPs getting together and shouting at each other in the most appalling and useless way. So I would make an appeal, Madam Deputy Speaker, as well as reforming the Commission to include elections for members of Parliament, we should have staff members on it. The Commission is responsible for the management of the House. It therefore should include people from the whole House community. And I'm looking around the House and I'm seeing not a great deal of agreement on all that one, but I hope that members of Parliament might actually think about this. And let's have the way that we run the House representative of the people who work in this place, and I think that's a reasonable suggestion. Now, I think we'll have a debate about the future of the Commission, and I'm looking forward to be part of it. I'll say to the Right Honourable Lady, unfortunately, I can't be responsible for decisions prior up to the Commissioner. I've not been to a meeting yet, so I'm looking forward to going to my first one on 24th. And I know she's looking at me as if I'm sort of responsible for some of the decisions I've made. I can't claim that responsibility yet. She could come back in a few months' time and blame me for all the terrible things that are going on in the Commission if I've been on it and we've not managed to get some of the reforms through. But I'm all for reforming the House Commons Commission, and I think a good, positive debate about the type of management structure we want in this House would be a good one to have. And maybe, Madam Deputy Speaker, as an idea, we could see if the Backbench Business Committee, they seem to be getting all the business just now. Like the Honourable Gentleman for Gateshead would be as well being the leader of the House and not the Right Honourable Gentleman, given that he practically determines and dictates everything that's going on, including this debate, Madam Deputy Speaker. So perhaps we could maybe encourage the Honourable Member for Gateshead to see if we can have a debate about the House of Commons Commission, because I think it would be a useful one to have, and we could hear the range of opinions about how we can make it a more effective, democratic, useful type of organisation. Because I think one thing that we have to conclude is it's got issues and difficulties, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. Is the member for Perth and North Perthshire the man to fix it out? Probably not. So I think that we need everybody else in the House to be involved and engaged in that debate, and I hope that we have it. Lastly, Madam Deputy Speaker, there's the ownership issue. Now, this is a very important one, and this might get to the heart of some of the frustrations and difficulties that members have expressed throughout the course of this debate, is who owns what when it comes to the plethora of initiatives. And I say plethora because we've got too many things going on, in my view. We have, of course, ICGS, which I've been a member of, and so I'm familiar with that work, and I know what we're doing, and I've got a good sense about the direction that we want to go in and the type of service we want to deliver. Obviously, Dame Laura's report I know because I've read it, we have these debates. But then there's Gemma White's review, and then there's another review that's going on in the House of Lords about what happens down there. So we've got 4 initiatives which seem to be happening simultaneously, with a whole range of different terms of references, and where most of them seem to be working quite collegiately with each other, it is creating confusion and difficulties. And I think we need to have a look at how we could bring most of these together under one work stream, which will make it sensible, particularly not just to members of Parliament, but to people across the House. So I make an appeal that if something we can take away from today is how we start to combine this. Then we've got to decide who owns this. Like, it does look like it will be the Commission, and I'll accept my responsibilities and obligations when it comes to that, as I'm sure the Right Honourable Gentleman will. But maybe the Commission isn't the best place to look at the ownership of all this. And maybe, and this is just a thought, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not a thought-out suggestion or proposal. Maybe we should be looking at some sort of select committee, some sort of new elected authority that would have the type of ownership over these initiatives that would be charged by the House to have a look specifically at these issues. And I think it's important enough to do this. And I know that the Right Honourable Lady chairs the Equalities Select Committee, but maybe we need something beyond that, which possibly could include our friends from the high and mighty place that we've got to always pay due deference to come in and maybe join us if they deign to be part of something with us humble, directly elected members. But maybe we could create and do something like that, and I put that forward as just a suggestion at this time. I'll think more about that, Madam Deputy Speaker, and see if we could come back with a firmed-up proposal or suggestions about how we do that. But I wouldn't despair, is what I say to colleagues across this House. We have come a long way. I think we've got to do more to reactivate interests from colleagues across the House. I think the mandatory training will help to do that once people are asked to do this and be part of something which I think might be a general package. But I think steady progress is being made, and I don't share the great sense of disappointment that's been expressed by the Right Honourable Lady and others about where we're getting there, because I'm confident that we are. It's been an absolute pleasure, privilege and humbling experience, Madam Deputy Speaker, to have been involved in the conversations and debates about this. And I see the Right Honourable Lady from South Northamptonshire has come back, and I did pay tribute to her and her leadership in all this. And I think we've all got the scars of the past year and a half when it comes to these things, but I think that we are making the steady. It's been a really excellent experience working with others across the House, and include, of course, the shadow leader of the House. But we are getting there, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think I just appeal for maybe just a little bit more patience when it comes to this, because the most important thing is that we get it right.